Hey everyone, welcome to the Mass Construction Show with today's guest, John Myers, pre-construction executive at Gilbane Building Company. I'm your host, Joe Kelly, and this podcast is about all things construction in Massachusetts and beyond. In today's episode, we discuss all aspects of pre-construction, design assist, early bid packages, strategy, and different approaches based off of the size of your firm. Today's episode is a masterclass, and I'm excited to bring you what John has to say. Enjoy the show.
Hey, John, welcome to the Mass Construction Show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yep. Came highly recommended by Greg and Chris. So
that's good.
Two people that I trust a lot.
Good.
So I'm excited. This is a question for me as well as for everybody that listens. You're a pre-construction executive, so your role is pre-construction. But in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds, pre-construction is this umbrella over everything that happens prior to putting a shovel in the ground. Right?
Yes.
So could you help people delineate between scheduling, estimating, procurement, maybe even BD, where their role fits into this? How does that process all break out? And I'll say one other thing. I know I just asked you a question, but I would think at smaller firms, there's one project manager that's doing all this, and they're not thinking, oh, right now I'm doing procurement, and right now I'm doing pre-con, and right now I'm doing estimate. I'm just doing pre-construction.
Right.
So what's the difference when you start getting to the scale that you work on at a company like Gilbane or Turner or something like that?
I think you hit on it. It's a question of scale and scope, right? So, and if we look at the history of architecture, engineering, of construction, designers produce drawings. We then put those drawings out to the street. Subcontractors bid on them. We execute the work in the field, and we turn the job over to the client. Mm-hmm. Historically, we've been very design, bid, build focused. So documents will go all the way to 100% CDs, and then they will get bid out. 30 to 40 years ago, we started seeing more of the phasing of how jobs were going to be deployed. You had folks who wanted cost and schedule certainty earlier in the process before documents were produced. And if you look at the overall pre-construction process, kind of like a basketball team, it kind of follows the same track as like the great James Naismith and the early basketball, where you had one play, you threw the ball to the center, who's your chief estimator. Mm-hmm. The chief estimator puts it in the basket. That represents like design, bid, build, 100% CD documents all the way into the basket. Then you get to a point where the three-point line gets invented, and now you have different roles of people who have different skill sets. On a phased job, the cost may be super important to the client, but the schedule may be more important, and that's your shooting guard. And maybe having Kemba Walker or Paul Pierce is almost more important than having Bill Russell in some instances. And so then you end up with someone who's extremely skilled at scheduling, kind of taking the lead on that project. We see that all the time in the industry. When you get to pre-construction, at some point where scheduling is super important, coordination like virtual design and construction, and making sure the building is built once correctly is super important. And you also want to eventually get the ball to your chief estimator and have him put it in the basket. You need a point guard to distribute that ball to everyone so that you can run good plays and have a normal process. As jobs gets larger and more complicated, you need to have those skill sets kind of be done by specialists. And the role of pre-construction, like what we call generic pre-construction or dedicated pre-construction, is to distribute the ball to those players and make sure that those players are talking to each other and giving the ball back when they're done with it. You reference smaller jobs. When you have a small single phase job, all those things can kind of proceed in parallel, like proceed linearly. When you have a larger job with lots of phases and it becomes almost unwieldy, the amount of information, you need lots of people with specific specialties who are doing their scale and scope. And so what myself and my team's responsibility is to do is make sure everybody's passing the ball back and forth very, very clearly and cleanly, and then making sure the ball gets to the center at the end and that the actual estimate is fully complete. So most of the time it ends up back with the center where the chief estimator is the most important thing.
Puts that number on it.
But he needs to know which phases are going to be done where, how many mobilizations and demobilizations, let's say that the tin knocker has, because if the tin knocker's got 4 mobilizations and demobilizations, he's got to leave an area and come back. That's going to make that number go up versus fully, he just rolls out in the field and knocks out all the tin all at once.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing I thought of when you were saying a client is very, estimate or price sensitive.
Yes.
And then you're like, but it's schedule sensitive to you. But yeah, I mean, schedule is going to drive cost.
Correct. And in
Yeah.
a lot of cases, like the greater Boston area and New England in general is a very advanced manufacturing, biopharmaceutical, advanced technology focused area. We do a lot of work in existing facilities that need to remain operational, and they're running 3 shifts. And so they will do things called rolling shutdowns, where one part of the process will stop and then the next area will stop and the next. And we only have 36 to 48 hours to actually execute the cut in of the new pipe. And so in that instance, many times schedule is more important than money, because they have to get re-going on their manufacturing line. So there's a lot of different aspects to architecture, engineering, construction, and it's not as clean and clear. I'm from Missouri, so we do a lot of ground up in greenfields, and it's much more clear in a lot of cases. There's a more linear process when you are here in New England, where like 80% of our land's spoken for, or buildable area is totally spoken for.
Zero lot line, occupied.
Exactly. Logistics and schedule and safety are all become major components, both of the cost and of the total project approach.
Yeah, all those things. And do you think this development of all these phases, and I mean, or kind of specific roles, and I want to ask you a little bit where procurement fits into that. Are they a result of, oh my God, like GMP construction, design assist, design build? Is it that the project delivery systems are getting more complex versus the James Naismith days, where an architect gave you 100% docs, you price it, and you go to work?
I don't think it's a function of it plays a little bit in if a client says, I really want to get going, and I know I have a very intense timeline, and I need to order my generator and my switchgear like today. Like, right? That breaking out procurement and being able to purchase those elements and track the delivery of those elements to the job, that is a component of it. I just also think that buildings are more complicated today than they historically have been. And I think the expectation, specifically in New England, of the level of competency of the builder is very different than it has been historically. And I think that that's an okay and a good thing. We are becoming more, and this is a very good thing, more like the manufacturing industry than we have ever been. And it continues to get more that every single day. The expectations of how you track your materials, how much control you have over the process, the certainty of outcome, that is something that's very aerospace and very manufacturing focused. And I think that it's pushed builders into more of a needing to understand and control the process better. I think that's better for the owners. And it also gives architects and structural engineers and mechanical engineers more certainty in that what they draw is going to have a certain outcome at the end of the day as well. So there's aspects of what you asked, like how much does design assist play into it? Design assist is really a tool to manage that phase process where they say, we want to get going. We don't want to take our mechanical orthos to 100% CD. We know that the HVAC contractor is just going to redraw our 100% CDs anyway. Let's stop at the permit set. Let's make sure scope capture is entirely complete. And then let's turn it over to a contractor who's only going to draw it fully coordinated one time, and then we've skipped a step in between. There's a right time and a right place and a right project to take that approach. There's not a one size fits all, but we've been successful, and we suggested on a majority of our jobs where we have critical timelines and we need to kind of start to fragment and break out those pieces of scope.
Okay. So construction has become more like manufacturing, right? And you want to have more processes in place and be more systematic about it. And then I'm wondering a little bit as we're talking, like there's a guy, Dave Supple, who's like, he wrote a little book on this and everything, which is he's like, the architect used to be what was called a master builder.
Yes.
And they really were the construction manager.
Yes.
Right. And they designed it. They were often the owner's representative.
Yes.
Right. And now the general contractor or construction manager has taken that role. I know maybe a lot of architects don't want to hear that, but like that seems like what's happened.
I think so. For the crowd, I have my Master of Architecture from the University of Kansas. So maybe I'm a representation of this condition. At Kansas, we learn that it is our responsibility as architects. I'm not a licensed architect, but when in the profession, to be responsible and accountable for the end state. Like that's something that they have ingrained in us, and that's part of why I really like that curriculum. And we continue to try and hire folks from there. I think that in certain jobs, like residential jobs, that still is the case. You do end up with situations where the architect does perform that role. As buildings have become more complex, the risk and the dollar value associated with the risk tends to get spread out amongst the parties, which I think can be a very good thing. It's important that different people have skin in the game. And what I mean by that is, for a $200 million project, most architecture firms may not want that risk of the end state either on their E&O insurance or just associated with them. And I think that what happened in the late 70s through the early 90s and the shift of the risk share incentivized builders to have more skin in the game and be more of the client's agent in the process. And I think that is generally a good thing. It basically took a lot of the peaks and the valleys out of the industry. You had some jobs go really, really well for builders, and then you had some jobs go really, really well for owners, and those peaks and valleys. I think what it's done in the splitting of the risk share is it's kind of the rising tide has raised all boats, and our baseline of what an average project is has become more on the successful side, and there's less volatility in the outcomes. And I think insurance companies really drove that. And I think that was a good thing. I think we did see more of the responsibility leave the architecture and structural engineering and mechanical profession and go towards the construction manager or the general contractor. But I think that's kind of we're at an intermediate state on the way to a true IPD risk share. And I think that every time we can one step ratchet our way towards that, where it's shared risk and shared reward. New England historically has been a little slower than maybe say California to adopt that approach. But I think that if we can one step ratchet our way there slowly year over year and get folks accustomed to that approach, it can have really good outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said earlier, which is as the complexity of the job increases, it requires more from each discipline and each specialty, right? Because as a general contractor, you can no longer know everything about everything, right? No. And it happens with my world, which is the code, right? The code has become so complex. I remember, and people have heard me say this a million times on this podcast, which is I was just talking with an owner of a medium-sized architecture firm, and we were talking about how the fact that project comes to the building department and they're asking questions, and the usual response from the building official is like, well, you need to go talk to your architect because they're the one that know the code. They're the ones that build to the code. But in reality, they don't know the code, and it's not their fault, right? And because the gentleman that I was talking to, he said, yeah, we used to have one or two people in our office that were like the code people that could answer the questions. But it's become so complex that now we just have code consultants that we go to and say, hey, what do I need to do with this fire rated wall here? Can I just butt it to the rated ceiling? Do I need to run it through the underside of the slab? Like, I think the complexity of these projects is causing us to change, right? And then just push towards that thing where, okay, this is going to be a shared risk. Right?
Shared risk and shared reward. I'll give a little story. On my very first project in New England, I was educated by, this is how old I am. There was an engineer with Flack and Kurtz, and Flack and Kurtz is now part of the WSP Global Group, who said to me, it's really important that when we work together as a team, that we have different opinions, and then we bring them all together and we push and pull on each other to try and get the best outcome. And so even if one person has the ability to answer that question based on 40 years of experience, having multiple different viewpoints looking at a problem can sometimes generate new solutions that one exactly. So I was on a phone call the other day with an electrical engineer, and they said, "Okay, can we get on a meeting? What you, John, sent to me doesn't make any sense." And I explained what I was looking for, and they said, "Okay, well, what if we do this?" And I was like, tell me more about how we would do that thing. Because this is a design build job that we're working on. And so I grabbed my electrical estimator, Rob, and they had a couple of folks on the call, and we iterated through on the phone call. Instead of writing a bunch of stupid emails back and forth to each other. We iterated through on the phone call and said, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And through that, I don't want to call it conflict, but creative back and forth, we were able to find kind of the optimized solution. So I was able to call our client and be like, I think we solved a major problem. They're like, great. And that's what the industry's all about.
Yeah.
Right?
It's almost like a funnel effect. Like all these ideas came in at the top and then out the bottom came
out came the best, came the right answer. And I think that that's the benefit of having lots of different subject matter experts contributing. The flip side of that is that if you're not well organized and you don't have a good teamwork arrangement and agreement, that can kind of spin out of control. And so what Gilbane really prides ourselves on is we try really, really hard to make sure everybody's viewpoint is heard. And we try to make sure that there's creativity in every conversation. Every phone call may not move the ball forward as much as we want it to be, but we know we're taking good steps towards the optimized condition all in the way.
Yeah, even if it's a small step.
Even if it's a small step. Like we just move the ball forward.
Okay. And then will you just give a little color on where procurement sits in this?
So procurement is funny because historically everybody has wanted 100% complete drawings because that's the minimal risk on procurement. But with the way supply chains have gone, and we can talk about supply chains and manufacturing because this is something that's super interesting to me. We've had to buy things earlier, and that started maybe a little bit before COVID. It was kind of a pressure point before COVID. COVID really exacerbated the problem. So what we really have to do now for every job is we look at when the job wants to finish, what the job's intermediate milestones really want to be, and then we have a list internally of all the predecessor things that give us those intermediate milestones and our end milestones. And we say to the client, here's the risk of procuring early, and here's the risk of not meeting an intermediate or a late milestone. We can structure this job however you, the client, would like it to be structured. We want to make sure that you've bought it that way with your designer, because a lot of times the designer may not have an early package as part of their contract. And so every project we have probably 20 hours of meetings of what is the optimized way to run procurement. And usually what that turns into is what we call waves. So wave naught, what I call wave naught or wave zero, is usually the enabling phase or pre-purchase or something. That is the we got to get ready to do this construction job. Sometimes wave naught will also be procurement of design assist, because the right way to the right point to buy design assist is usually about 100% DD or maybe a little bit after. And that's usually when we have the loads far enough along that we can pre-purchase the long lead equipment.
How are you determining the milestones? Are you taking the critical path and...
So I think it's every job and every client's different. Once we win a job or once we've told that we're going to execute a job or we're brought in to work with a client, we sit down and we try to understand from their standpoint what their most important condition is. They may have put an RFP out with an end date because they had to put an end date on the job, but they may actually care about something that's more immediate, like they want to turn over a certain number of beds by some date. That's not their final milestone, but that's an intermediate milestone. It's understanding with the client what their most important milestones are and then pulling from those to give us our intermediate predecessors and the risk associated with it. It's
client driven.
It's definitely client driven. I would say only about 30% of jobs is the actual final substantial complete. Like I'm just giving you a rough number.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
actually the thing that drives the big milestone. And that tends to be like, hey, if you're going to do a brand new like greenfield manufacturing project, that's where that matters, and being able to roll product off the line. But when it comes to phased occupied renovations, which we do a lot of, many times it's turning over that first space or turning over that first rentable or leasable condition.
Yeah. Or if you're doing enabling work to an occupied facility, hey, getting steam online at this date so they can continue this process and then we can continue construction. And even though it's going to fork, but it's a milestone for you, it's a milestone for the owner. And go.
Internally, we actually, it's almost a joke. We'll walk into a meeting and someone will be like, oh, this is a school job. I'm like, nope, this is a utilities job. And everybody's like, yep, that is the truth. Because really, the most critical piece is the steam or hot water or chilled water or waste or sanitary, or getting the groundwater retention basin into the ground so you can complete the rest of the work. So I would say, you talked about the complexity of the industry. I've talked about the complexity of the industry. I think I don't want to blame the codes, because the codes are a function of our values as an industry, right? They help us guide our way. I think that we as a culture, as humanity kind of continues to evolve, things are going to be different and important to us. And the AEC industry needs to evolve with what's important to folks. Like maybe 100 years ago, no one would ever have put a rainwater retention basin in the ground under the building. They would just let it run off into the stream. But it's important to the Commonwealth today that we are good stewards of our watersheds. And so that's something that we just need to honor and respect and work around and not try and fight along the way because it's cultural here.
Yep. So owner-driven milestones, once you have those milestones, you're now looking at early needs and long lead items, and that's where procurement is starting to run that stuff to ground?
Yes. And then as we get more certainty of outcome so there's we break it into kind of a couple different things. There's we talked about the wave knot. That's a lot of time that's generation, like that's equipment. We call it generation, or we lump fans and air handlers into generation as well, even though it's not generation. And then there's distribution, right? The distribution is the pipe, the duct, this on the MEP MEP side. Like it's the main production work in the field. And then at the end, it's finishes and controls, right? So it's generation, and then you've got distribution and the production work. And at the very end, it's finishes and controls. And so those tend to be how the waves are structured as well, is those three big chunks. And like I said, every job, every client's different. Sometimes they want more waves. Sometimes they say, you know what, this is way too much. I don't want to be doing 3 major sets of POs or 3 GMPs. I just want to do it once at the end. You, Gilbane, do it however you see fit from your workload standpoint. But at the end, all I care about is that one final GMP at the end. And it is and that I think also is where what's driving this this kind of basketball five team members approach of the pre-construction is because if every job is different and there's really no single pathway to do it, we have to be so flexible.
That's the word I was going to use.
As you were describing, flexible. And especially because we're not a general contractor. We are a construction manager at risk. We have a little bit of self-perform that we do. But at the end of the day, our job is to help the client execute the job the most efficient way, but also the way that the client wants to run that job.
Okay. Going specifically now to assuming that that's, pre-con as a role is the point guard.
Yep.
Is pre-con the first purchasing touching?
In our case, it almost entirely yes.
And what is pre-con do in more depth?
Yes.
Right? We were talking about what's this whole process leading up to putting a shovel in the ground, and that's all these that's the 5 players on the team. But if we're going to call pre-con the point guard, what does that point guard do?
Sure.
First person talking to the client.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times. So I work very closely with and so does Katie, who helps run support operations with me in New England. We will sit with business development once a week and go through jobs that are on the docket that we're going to chase or jobs that we've recently been awarded. I sit with our business unit leadership and division leadership weekly, sometimes more than once a week, and we will sit down and go through what do we need to do starting out. Most jobs, most efforts, most RFPs, most jobs we're awarded, I am first in the door and usually the last one out, which I think that is good. I think it creates continuity all the way through. I prefer to be there from napkin sketch onward. And when I say I mean like Rhino model or Sketcher model, I prefer to be there because I've been very lucky in my career. I started out in virtual design and construction, so I had a higher touch rate than most people would ever have in their career because we were doing coordination 6 weeks per level per building and moving on project to project to project. And that was really beneficial for my growth because I got to see way more. So I've seen probably 90% of Gilbane jobs in New England for the past 14 years, which is pretty wild. That's an experience base that not many people have. So coming in, Katie Stromolo and myself, and she was in scheduling, so she got the same thing. She did every schedule for every Gilbane job for the first 16 years she was with the company. So big. She has a lot. Her experience base is phenomenal. We have the ability to come and be like, hey, on that one job that was very similar to this 7.5 years ago, we did X, Y, and Z. Those 3 things were successful. That one wasn't. Let's start this next job with that condition already established. And I think that is when you can bring people with that experience base, not just in the industry, but in their company to bear. And the superintendent who's been assigned to the job, and how they tick, and the project manager wants to run the job. Those things help when you're first through the door at Napkin Sketch.
Yeah. And are you as far back as, this is to the no phase, but where we even want to go after this job?
Yes. Our business development does a really great job in only putting forward things that we know or fairly certain are going to go through as going to go there. That first kind of line of defense of what makes sense for us as a business. Are we with the right team? Do we have the right team? Is it as part of our strategic plan to go after chase this job? And then once they've kind of put it through there, it goes to our business unit leadership, our division leadership, and then Katie and I get involved and say, okay, can we be successful either bidding this job or hopefully negotiating the job or working with a client in a manner that will allow the greatest degree of success. And then once we've got that, we start going to meetings. Both Katie and I have the ability to generate, we call them cost models or budgets. They're not really estimates at that point, because an estimate is you have a set of drawings and you're literally estimating the scope of work. But
so more like order of magnitude, like
we think it's more it's more scientific than that, because we're a $7 billion company, and we've got the experience base. We have the data, and we have the experience base, and we have the people. We have 30 and 40-year vets who work for us, and we can pick their brain and say, what were the 5 things that most matter on the last one of these typologies that you did? And that will be situations that aren't contained in a past estimate or aren't contained in a past GMP. Mm-hmm. So we will sample both quantitative data that we've got, but also the qualitative data. And then Katie and I have the ability, we work closely with Joe McCoy, who's our chief estimator, and we'll all get together and build. It's a pre-GMP parametric model. That's what we do for the majority of the things that we work on. And that's informed by all those quantitative and qualitative data sets. And most of the time we're pretty close. We really pride ourselves on that certainty of outcome from a cost and schedule standpoint.
And are you looking at whether you can staff it even ever?
Oh, that's the very first thing. And that's before it ever comes to us, that it goes through our business unit leadership. So it's very important to Gilbane that we don't overcommit and underdeliver. We want to undercommit and overdeliver. And I think that sometimes that helps and sometimes that hurts us. But 75 to 80% of our work is with repeat clients. And that's really important and valuable to our company. So we need to have that level of confidence that we can both execute the job in the beginning, the middle, and the end, and turn over a world-class product to our clients.
Do you feel it hurts when you have a competitor that's promising someone the world that's not realistic?
Happens all the time. It's happened every year I've been on this company, and that's construction and that's life, right?
Yes.
Like we're a 150-year-old company. I say we would like to be around for another 150 years. The kind of mandate, I say in a good way, that our leadership and the people who've been with our company have passed down is there are people who came before you, a long time before you, and there's people coming after you. Your job is to be a steward of the company and the company's reputation and do the right thing even when it's unpopular. And that's the charge that we have.
So take a long-term view and not
at 150 years old, that is the most important thing. And we also, since I'm going to plug for Gilbane, we're one of the safest contractors in America. So that's also the other thing. We won't pursue something if it's an unsafe condition. And that is something that does sometimes help, keeps us from winning jobs. But again, 150 years old, we need to be around for another 150 plus years.
Okay. And then if you could continue to kind of walk through, like, in an ideal world, you're at that napkin stage. And then how are you coordinating or pulling in other people to make the decisions, right? You talked about supers. Like, one big point of interest to me, and I think to you as well, is like site logistics, like, because all of this is cost, right? Do we need to put a man of material hoist on this? Can we do it with boom? Like, is that like you're running point on all that, but you're obviously not doing all of that, right?
Sure. So I actually really enjoy which type of crane we have on this job conversation with supers. I'll text Kim and be like, "You ready for fisticuffs? Like, we're gonna have this is gonna be a good one. It's gonna be crawler or tower. Let's go." Yep. And I think that is it's really healthy. Like, she'll have really good opinions on one way to go. And I'll be like, well, if we could have 2 small fast movers, like, would you be willing to administer two smaller fast movers? And if we did that, do you need another superintendent to administer that other crane? Like those are the kinds of conversations that we will have. And then say, okay, if we do that, are we blocking ourselves from using a hoist on the other side of the building, and thinking it through, because we know that we have to build a plan that is, I don't say bulletproof, but it needs to be able to stand up to scrutiny from clients and engineers, like anybody. Everybody's going to look at the job. Everybody's going to say the approach is either right or wrong. And so a big part of my job and Katie's job is working with our superintendents and working with our senior project executives who also have a massive experience base. And how are we going to flow the job? We were just working on a proposal with Kim, she's awesome, and Ben Schwach, who's our senior PX, and we had a really like positive fisticuffs on which way are we going to flow the steel, and we went back and forth for like 4 days on it. And at the end of the day, how we're going to load the equipment in the building became the critical factor of how we're going to flow the steel. And so pre-construction is not one person on complicated jobs. Like I can't stress it enough. I like to think that I'm pretty good at my job. I'm sure everybody in pre-construction thinks they're pretty good at their job. We're all in an industry that prides itself on intelligence and self-starting. I think the biggest thing for anybody who wants to be in pre-construction is understanding that you will never know everything, and your primary goal is not to know everything. It's to know who to go to get the answers from in the most optimized fashion. That's what I mean by point guard. You don't want to be cardiac Kemba. Kemba was great. Kemba put it all on his shoulders, and that's why Kemba's not one of the best point guards to ever live. The best point guards to ever live are ones who don't score. They're the ones who distribute the ball.
So if I'm thinking at this kind of linearly, Joe, you're making the first pass at, I forget what you called that first level estimate.
Like a cost model,
yeah,
parametric cost model.
So you've got that cost model, and then to me, in my mind, the next step has to be that kind of site logistics and how are we going to put this together, right? Because how can you build a schedule if you don't know, are we going to, this 3 towers with a podium, are we going to build tower A, B, and C, or are we just going to go from the bottom up? Like, are we going to have 1 crane? Are we going to have 2? Are we going to have a lift? This cost associated? Like, does that process, is that like the next step?
It's parallel. It's parallel with the cost model. It has to be. So we will, we used our primary scheduling software is like P6, right? We use P6 to do our schedules, but like just like SketchUp happens before Revit, we have other software that helps us build the framework or the skeleton of what the schedule looks like. And we start from, I call it the children of the schedule are important. Like the children are the individual activities, right? But the parent level, which is like which building comes first, is actually almost more important. So something that like a lot of schedulers will do is they'll start with what are the main activities that have the longest duration, and what we try to do internally is say what is the highest WBS that we could think of, and we work WBS by WBS by WBS top to bottom.
So like rough floor,
it would be more like It's so funny. I almost insist that we do bid package format for all of our estimates because it's how we're going to buy the job eventually. But when it comes to scheduling, it's almost more important to do it uniformat, where it's like substructure, foundations, enclosure, interiors. Interiors. Yeah. Okay. So like, because that, to me, if you're getting granular on a floor by floor basis, it means you've solved the other stuff already. Do you know what I mean? Like let's say we'll use a multifamily for example. We know we have to build the podium first. Can't build the wood on top of the podium until the podium's there. Okay. To do the podium, if we're going to work safely, we have to have the core in place before we have people working underneath the core. Like that's a very important thing that we don't want to be dropping things on people's heads. It's everybody needs to be able to go home safely. To do the core, we need to have the foundations for the core. So like that's the level that we start at. And then we say, okay, we know roughly based on our experience, based on all of our data, that a core takes X many weeks and the podium is going to take Y many weeks per square foot. And so once we've got that all roughed out, we will call the client and be like, I think it's 22 and something months. And they're like, yeah, that's what I think. I'm like, great. We're going to continue to populate the data. We'll let you know how it shakes out.
Refine.
Right. And refine. I think if anybody takes anything away from this is that silos are bad and communication is key, and making sure all the stakeholders are bought into the decisions we're making is a big piece of what we try to do. I never want to walk into a meeting where I am trying to convince 7 people who haven't seen something that my way is the right way. I've already lost at that point. I needed all of them to be in pre-agreement of where we're going to be. And now we're just talking about the nitty-gritty details.
So when the ops person and the scheduler have a conversation about saying, okay, you know what might make more sense is what if we built it this way and did this and that? Are you then kind of the point person that goes to estimating and say, hey, if we change from how we have it right now and did this, what's the cost implications? Is that like?
I'll give you an example of what we did the other day, and maybe I think it'll be close. So we're doing a job on the North Shore right now, and concrete contractor called us and said, we think we have a better way. And so I said, okay, well, here's what we need. We need senior general superintendent, we need the PM, and we need the chief estimator on the job. So on the phone call. 24 hours later, we had everybody on the phone call talking about what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And I turned to our estimator and said, you got it? And they said, yep. And we said, great, congratulations. And so we moved on, and then we moved on. I think it is the world is way more complicated than it's ever been. The idea that we're going to have very explicit structure in the way we've had it in the past, I think we're leaving that world. And I think a lot of it is we just all need to be more flexible as information comes at us. We need to have enough structure that we hold our deadlines and we manage things, but there's going to be creativity coming from every corner. And how you respond to that creativity, whether it's, like you said, a PM or it's a concrete subcontractor, being able to like inject that information into your work stream as quickly as possible is kind of what sets apart the people who are good at it and maybe just otherwise plans and specs kind of thing. So, and there's a world for plans and specs. Like there's an I don't know what percentage of our industry is residential and light commercial, but that's the perfect world for plans and specs. It's very discrete. It doesn't require a lot of that kind of major flexible, like resequencing of a project, right? And that's the world where that is really effective.
So, summarizing, you're managing all of those players in the process. All the people we talked about, the schedule, the estimator, ops, procurement, VDC folks, which we haven't talked about much, but you might say, okay, hey, we're thinking about this. Can you model this and see if we can fit this through the door if we did it this way? And you're managing that process. But you just started talking about, and it's a nice segue to kind of my next question, which is subcontractors. So like I'm old, I still like to call them subcontractors or trade partners, whatever we like to call them today, right? Yeah. They're part of this team, ironically, as well. Even though they're technically not part of the team.
They're the most important part of the team. I mean, if you don't have their buy-in, there's nothing, no matter what I say, it doesn't matter. I mean, when I was running VDC, I had a very deep but not very broad set of relationships in the industry. I knew all the coordinators at all the MEP companies. Like we would text each other, joke with each other, whatever. And then when we moved into pre-construction, I had to get much broader in my relationships. And now most of my day is spent texting estimators and project managers for what we call the Great Eight. So MEP, FP, envelope, steel, concrete, and site work. Those are 70% of any cost of any job is going to be in those 8 packages. And so a big part of what our job is to have good relationships with those folks. We generally don't do anything in a vacuum. It's either we're trying to solicit the experience base of every stakeholder who's going to potentially be part of the project. And when we can do that effectively, we end up with good projects.
So they seem to become more heavily involved when you do like design assist or design build, however you want to frame it. And even like early bid package or early award. Like when is it right to like move from, hey, these are the resources that I have to they need to be on paper part of this process sooner?
Every job's different. Generally speaking, you want scope capture complete before you start to have those on paper conversations. When I say scope capture, the best example I have is you may know you're going to build a warehouse, like the simplest of buildings mechanically, but if you don't have a complete riser diagram, just for how the heat pump RTUs are going to work, and you don't understand what your control sequence is, at least in the form of a narrative or a riser diagram, having that conversation with that trade is not going to be very productive for the project, cost or schedule wise. Yep. So a lot of what my job is now is I will have conversations with our design partners, either on a design build basis or if they're non-contractual with us. And if they don't have a riser diagram, I will start to outline one. It won't be contractual, but it will be a good representation of what we're trying to achieve. A lot of what we do in pre-construction is bridge that gap of idea, concept, narrative, pause. Now we need to price that. Now we need to price that condition. How do we give our trades the best information to price that? And a lot of times it comes down to we'll outline the sequence of controls, or we'll be able to at least narrate it to the trades. And I think the scope capture part of it is the most critical. We do a lot of concept, but what the industry doesn't do a good job of is taking time at the 100% design development to ensure that the major scope is truly captured 90-10. And I think that if we all spent more time trying to do that, we would be able to deploy our jobs faster.
So it's just quicker getting into a real solid number.
Real solid number. And like, I'm trying to find a good example of the scope capture. If you know that you need to provide heat to a core and shell building, but you know you're only dumping 65-degree air onto the floor, but at the perimeter you need to add heaters. Mm-hmm. The words like every space requiring heat in a narrative isn't really like what we need to be doing. We need to be able to say, like, and this is something that like we'll read that and be like, okay, well, we need to kind of solve this problem. Like, carry unit heaters every X many square feet and carry all the piping associated with it. So we will help infill that information. I would prefer always to sit down with our design team and be like, okay, no, we actually have to like solve this together, so that when we provide those conditions and instances, we aren't creating a condition where we've sucked down all the hot water in the building and now you can't use it to treat the air, right? And so those are the types of like, that's what I mean by scope capture. We don't have to have everything drawn and detailed out. What we need to make sure is the loads are correct, the amount of air, the amount of water, the amount of sprinkler, the right pressure, all of that is correct, because those are the things that later in the game, after you've awarded design assist, if you don't have enough capacity, that's where it starts to become expensive, and that's where people get very upset.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I love your passion. And then could you, I threw them out there, but could you explain the difference between design builds, design assists, early award?
Sure.
But like
So design build is a contract type. The AIA actually has a design build contract type. Consensus Docs has a design build contract type. It is a nationally recognized method of procurement.
Pardon me for interrupting. Do you have a preference between AIA docs versus consensus docs?
Every job is different. Every client's different. We have some really great jobs that have consensus docs, and then we have some really great jobs that use AIA docs. It really comes down to what the client's looking for in their contractual procurement. I don't have a preference. We will work with any contract type. A lot of clients have their own contract type that didn't start out with an AIA or a consensus doc. So a big piece of what our senior PX core and myself do is we will do a contract review and make sure that the way we can run a job most effectively is in line with the contract. We do like executing jobs in a design build fashion because it's the closest thing to vertically integrated that you can get, right? It's there's pros and cons between construction management at risk and design build, but when it comes to getting a product, a building out the door in the most streamlined fashion possible, design build is usually the most effective, efficient way to proceed down that road.
So it's a contract type where contractually the trade partners are responsible for design.
Not necessarily. It is a contract type where we'll call it the builder, is responsible for usually to hold the architect and the engineers, and then we will also hold the trade partners. We usually, under a design build contract, will then tell the design engineers and the architect how far to take the design versus taking it all disciplines, taking it to 100% city. We will say, hey, take tin to 60% or permit set. And then we will turn around and buy 60% to fully 100% from the trade partner. Usually there's some component of delegated design within that trade partner scope. Every job's different, every contract's different, every design. I've never done the same design build contractor approach exactly the same way. Everything is always different, but we have good matrices and processes that guide us through. Okay, in this instance, it's a multi-phase riser, and we need to give the entire mechanical pipe riser to the trade contractor. So, mechanical designer of record, what we need you to do is draw a single line riser diagram, and then you're done. And that's the completion of your scope of work. And then trade contractor, you need to go and get E&O insurance and professional liability insurance to cover you on the remainder of the design of the scope of work on the rest of it. And a big part of it is making sure that we have the right insurances in place in that design build structure.
Okay. And they're all contractually, including the designers of record, are all under the CM.
On a true design build, yes, but we have some jobs. We have some. There's always some. There's always some, and you like and so it's fascinating. In New England, most of the time, the architect doesn't hold the geotech contract. Usually, the owner does. But on a design build contract, the CM, the GC, often will hold geotech on behalf of the owner. So everyone's different. On a design build, it tends to be more vertically integrated of a process. There's a drawback too. The client has less direct control of the process. Some clients really like that. Some clients don't have the internal infrastructure to manage a project. And in those jobs, they say, please, turnkey, that's all I want. Here's my total investment value for the job.
I want one throat to choke.
That's nice. That's nice. The less nice way of saying it, but it is definitely it tends, it's very European. The turnkey design build is very European. I was blessed to be able to work in Europe for a little while, and it is it's a very different way of looking at things. But someone like Adidas who wants this is my facility. I want one vision. I don't want people fighting underneath me.
Yeah,
I want this to be my beautiful building. Go do it, Zublin. And that was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I would want that.
Yeah.
As an owner, I don't like even when I see owners like, okay, well, we're going to buy this ourselves. Like, it seems like that 99 times out of 100 doesn't go well.
Pros and cons. So I've tried to grow up a little bit in my career. I started very young. I've tried to see the world through different people's eyes. Like when we did our own house, my wife and I were very specific about what light fixtures we wanted. And so we procured all our own light fixtures, and our prime was really cool about it. And we sat down with him. We said, hey, here, it's all 120, like nothing special. There's no lighting control. It's going to be super easy. Like it's all just line voltage control on off. And they were like, thank you. Thank you for not doing integrated automation on your light fixtures, right? So I think it's just communication and preference. We're totally okay if a client wants to either save money or be the specifier of the condition from their certainty of outcome. Most of the time, if speed is of their paramount concern, it's better for them not to manage it because it's part of our work stream. But again, it's flexibility is king, and that's we want to respect how clients want to execute the job. We always have opinions and suggestions, and I'm usually pretty vocal about what I think. Yeah. But it's about making sure the client feels like they're getting the best deal at the end of the day, because that's it.
Yeah, I just look at it as if I'm the owner.
Yeah,
I don't want it to be my problem if we needed 100 and 75 shows up, and now everybody's standing around. Now it's my problem because the schedule's all effed up, and it's sitting on I just think what? Why? I don't want that. I don't want that headache. You handle it, right?
It happens. That's the part of construction that everybody thinks oh, we're eventually going to be as efficient as manufacturing. There's always going to be that factor in construction of something's going to be that way. And I think what sets good construction managers apart from others is the ability to kind of roll with those punches. And I think that's part of construction in the industry. We do try to give the best certainty of outcome and advise our clients to do things the most streamlined way.
Yeah. Okay, so that's design build.
Yep.
What's design assist then?
Design assist is any gamut of authoring under the responsible care of the designer that isn't contractually being responsible for authoring the scope themselves. So if you think of construction as pre-permit set and post-permit set, right? All coordination, for the most part, in a traditional fashion, is post-permit set. The mechanical contractors have an obligation to coordinate their scope of work on their shop drawings, right? But they have no obligation to design the job. If you get to permit set, but not to a full 100% CDs, there's some scope that won't be fully designed on the orthos, on the designer orthos, that we are going to ask the trade partners to author. They're going to have more responsibility for the risk of the dollars with that. Like maybe all the valves aren't on the permit set, but we need them to carry the appropriate number of valves to complete the job in a maintainable fashion for the future, right? So we will, as part of the buyout of Design Assist, say you own the drawings that have been done to date. They represent a permittable condition. Here, carry also the following allowances for the following scope items. And then you, the trade, either under a trade GMP or we can do a lump sum, either way, are responsible for making sure that that condition gets put into your shop drawings under the responsible care of the engineer of record. And I think that's a consensus docs term, under the responsible care. And I think that is where, any Design Assist is a scale. It's kind of a gradient on the way. Anything between permit set and 100% CDs represents some form of Design Assist on the shop drawing side. On the estimating and scheduling side, what we normally buy is meetings and advice and budgeting from them. So instead of going out to the street for budgeting and maybe you get a number back and maybe you don't, you're putting people under contract early to ensure that you get a budget from them and that they're going to give you 3 budgets through the process and their PM is going to be allocated to the job 10% of their time. That way you can pick up the phone and make sure you've got somebody at your hip answering those questions.
And there's a cost for that.
There is, but a lot of times what we've really tried to do is say, look, you would have done all this on the back end through the submittal process anyway, and you'd be re-engineering a condition and you'd be fighting upstream against a design condition that was already extant. We're giving you skin in the game. You're just replacing your submittal costs with Design Assist costs. It's not equivalent, but it's close. And I think that it's a little bit more money. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's more than 2 or 3% on the trade package, but it drives that certainty of outcome to a far more.
So to use very
condition.
simple dollar values, it's $10,000 you have to spend for the Design Assist piece, but there was $8,000 you would have
for
doing designing and submittals and all that stuff. So it's cost you $2,000 more. It's
correct, and a lot of times clients will say, I'm willing to, it's an insurance policy. I'm willing to pay for that insurance policy. And I have a sub who's going to, a lot of times what we do on Design Assist is if it's either a lump sum contract where they get the scope today, or it's a consulting contract that if they, their final budget is within X% of the target value or underruns the target value by Y%, the job is theirs. They basically get right of first refusal on the job. And so that gives the client the certainty of outcome that so if the MEPs are 35% of the job and you have all the MEPs in Design Assist, you've just given yourself a certainty of outcome on 35% of the job. That's a big deal. That's how we look at cost and certainty, is how much of the job can we guarantee certainty of outcome for before we ever get to permit set.
Do you think it helps with also psychology of the trade partner where they're bought in to what's on paper versus somebody who is I wouldn't have designed it this way. This is going to be a headache and raising more RF. Does it help where someone is kind of owning that design?
Think it's actually a relationship building is the coolest qualitative
biggest
benefit to it, where in a lot of cases for Design Assist, we'll actually do colo. We'll put them in the room together. And being able to look each other in the eye, a mechanical designer, HVAC designer, Gilbane, client in a lot of cases, and be able to shake hands and eat lunch with them afterwards. It's like magic. I don't know how, it's I swear it's I can't define it.
Yeah, you're on the same team now.
You're on the same team. And I think that the relationship building and being able to text them, being able to build a text message relationship between designer and trade partner is it's like magic. I can't even begin it. Whatever we would pay for it, it's almost like the value is incalculable because you can solve problems so quickly when that's the case.
Yeah. And now how do you, and I know your answer is going to be depends on the job, right? But humor me here.
Sure.
What's the thought process when you're deciding who to bring on for design assists? Like you're kind of automatic with the MEPs, right? When does it cross to be the Miss Metals person or the drywall?
The next one's curtain wall. The next one's curtain wall and envelope, and that's almost so. It's MEP, FP. Integrated automation is usually huge if you have a big integrated automation job. Making sure either if you're going to stick build your integrated automation, knowing what the limits of the integrated automation package are going to be. Like, are you DDC? Are you PLC? Like, what are you trying to do? And making sure that the people you're going to target for that have the ability to like get the parts and smarts and do the programming. But then the next most critical activity is building envelope, especially if it's going to be unitized or modular. That is in a lot of cases, that is a 20+ month start of design assist to first panel on site. Like that, if you're going to do a large building, you really have to engage those folks super early and bring them on. And in a lot of cases for our design build work, we'll have our designers and engineers of record establish planes and criteria, and then we will go and do an RFP for a design build envelope consultant. And the same thing.
I was just about to say, do you prefer the envelope consultants?
When I say envelope consultant, I mean we will go hire a fabricator and installer to be our envelope person, because it can, if the architect draws it and it's not the way that the system wants to work, we're just going to be redoing it later, and that takes a boatload of time.
Yeah, I ask about the envelope consultant only because envelopes have seemingly have become so complicated.
They're so complicated
that I almost, do you feel like that extra level of bringing a third party as well?
We need the creative conflict, definitely. We need the architect to establish the aesthetic and the structural engineer to
the design
establish
intent.
the effect.
This is what I wanted to look like.
And then the envelope consultant is there to ensure that they start out with we must have no thermal bridges, right? There will be no thermal bridges on the project. And then the fabricator comes in and is like, well, if the architect wants this look, which means we're going to potentially have this theoretical thermal bridge. And then we'll work back and forth for 3 to 6 months on what is the right and appropriate way to do it.
The skin cannot float.
Exactly. So I did a lot of envelope design assist when I was working in VDC. And I think it's something we definitely need the creative conflict, I'm saying in finger quotes, because there's definitely 10 ways to skin the cat, and you need to make sure that everybody's bought in on the appropriate way, because there's nothing worse than trying to hang the panel in the field and finding out you got to stop. It's like it rains 170 days in Massachusetts like a year. It's one of those like it's the best insurance policy you can get is doing your envelope details correct, just because it just doesn't stop raining here. Like today's June whatever, and it's rained for the last 14 weekends in Massachusetts.
And like a lot of people miss it's part of the mechanical design as well.
Yes.
And that also can be problematic, right?
Yes. It's
a complicated.
Yes.
It's people look at it and say that is a very uncomplicated thing. It is static. It's not really static, but they look at it as just that's just a wall, right? It's not a brick wall anymore, right? It's these are complicated systems that are doing so much, right?
I didn't want this to become an envelope conversation because it is one of my favorite things to talk about. But I think as we in the Commonwealth evolve our energy policy, it's even just going to become more so.
Yes, because with passive house and the irony is this complex system, but then you see somebody with a beater and a 2x4 smashing it to get it into place. It's the beauty of construction.
It is the beauty of construction. And when an envelope goes in, a unitized envelope goes in correctly, there's nothing more beautiful in the world. When it goes in poorly, or you have steel sticking through where the plane of glass is supposed to be, there's not a worse feeling in the world, right? So
it's a disaster. So is more better when it comes to design assist?
I think that
should more trades
I think it's a balance. I think it's always a balance. There's some scope that always wants to be 100% city design bid build. Painting. Let's start with painting. Painting's always the one. Like in theory, we should, unless it's a specialty epoxy crazy coat, right? Should always be design bid build. Let's just start with the easiest one, and then you can work your way up that gradient and say, If we buy out painting and taping separately, does painting and taping need to be design assisted? Maybe not. Sometimes it is, sometimes it doesn't. And you can we'll work from the grade 8 down that gradient, and we'll work up the gradient from finishes, and we'll usually land at a right balance point. And it's always a conversation with the client and the architect and the engineer. Not every mechanical engineer is totally sold on design assist, and I have heard the arguments. I totally get where they're coming from, and I don't really disagree with them on some of their points, because some of their points are really good. It is always a balance of speed, cost, preference, quality, and where you want to have those, we'll call it the gauge pointer end up on each of those items. And we just want everybody to be bought into the approach.
And just like design, build, design, bid, build has a place sometimes too.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then early awarded packages. That is, the first two things, design assist and design build, are more contract style, whatever. An early award is just no different than anything else. That's just a trade we want on sooner, and we don't have the GMP finalized. Is that kind of how
I think it's also a risk. It's a riskier item. So if you wanted to lump sum procure, let's call it concrete at 100% design development, there's going to be if you competitively bid that package, you're probably going to end up with a larger spread of numbers. You take the low guy, you're going to be missing some scope unless you've got a really, really robust scope of work that you've outlined. But if the client says, I love working with concrete contractor X, and they're going to be my concrete contractor on every job I do in the greater New England area, we'll say, great, we'll award them whenever you're comfortable. You have their unit rates. You can do all your changes on unit rate, and we'll help you manage that. We'll write you a good scope of work to try and mitigate those changes. Yeah, we do that all the time. And that's a good way to it's a good way to ensure that you get the sub that the client wants on the project. And that's okay. And that's a client preference. A lot of times the early awards we end up doing are that wave knot, which is the long lead equipment. I mean, curtain wall and envelope is an early procurement. When we ask, a lot of cases, we ask the envelope contractors to do it as a lump sum early award, and they control how much money they make or lose. And that's
more design driven though, right? Because you need them to start that design process. Correct.
And it's very challenging to take a building envelope in today's world to 100% CDs, unless you say it will be Conair extrusions, right? And everybody will carry Conair, and that's just how it's going to be. And if you pick your out of a catalog for all your elements, then you can do it that way. Yeah.
Yep. So some of it is design driven, lead time driven.
Yes.
And then is it ever just schedule driven, which is what I was saying before? Is it ever just, okay, this is a really large GMP. It's $1 billion job. We don't have everything designed, but we need to start. So we need our foundation contractor, our excavator, and probably our steel, because they're going to have to start manufacturing. Yep. So we're just going to award them out of the gate?
Yeah. And so we've done it with steel before. I'll give you a specific example. So we agree on what the tonnage is going to be. We agree on the number of connections. We agree on the number of moment connections. We agree on what the average weight of the deck is, and then variations on those metrics end up, within some percentage are owed by the sub. And beyond those, if it turns out that the building performance criteria increases, that's going to be a cost borne by some degree of contingency in the project. And it's all about how much risk and how far the drawings are and what the appetite for risk and contingency usage at that early stage the client and the team want to take. And we've done it where we've awarded a trade off a very, very bare bones napkin sketch. Yeah. And we've done it where we've been past permit set. And again, it's a gradient. I think the most important things when you buy them early is you establish really good performance metrics. And when we buy folks out, we actually, for design assist and design build, we actually have a performance criteria that we look for from our design partners, and we help them write a performance spec. How is the system intended to perform?
So kind of, hey, we're going to have a floor and it needs to hold X number of pounds.
Yeah, 250 pounds per square foot, right? Yep.
And whether that needs to be 4,000 or 5,000 pound concrete, we don't know that yet, but
correct. But
because we don't know where all the intermediate steel is going to be, and
correct.
But you need to provide us that. But if we then say later on down the line, you know what, we want 300 pounds per square foot, well, that's a change.
Or
right?
we plan well for that allowance for that early on in the process. And I think that's what makes the contractors who have done this a lot. We have an experience base in this. So we know what's hurt us in the past. So
good point.
Beam pens are a great example, right? Beam pens aren't going to be shown on the drawings at an early stage. Carry X many beam pens of the square type, Y many beam pens of the plated circles, and Z many beam pens of the non-plated circles, right? And we know.
And is that stuff like allowances or?
It's either an allowance, carry $250,000 in beam pens, or it's going to be carry each of these types, and we're only going to pay you $5,000 for a shop welded, $15,000 for a field welded.
Okay,
like it's a unit rate base, right? We really try to. We want
limit
to be
the
more
unknowns.
certain in our scope, and we want to have certainty of outcome because that generates better certainty and better value for the client at the end of the day.
Yeah, rather than this open-ended.
Open-ended is bad. Open-ended is really bad. It just, even if everybody tries to make it work really well, at the end of the day, it drives a lot of conflict. So
No, that's I mean, obviously you've spent a lot of time, you and Gilbane have thought a lot of time thinking about that, but that's, it's great. I would have had in my mind, okay, we say it's up to this. If it's over, then it's a change. But you're saying, no, we would probably put some gradient in there on everything, right?
Everything, black and white is bad. Gradients are good. Gradients are good, and it drives conversation on things. Eventually, you have to get to black and white.
Yes.
But there's definitely room for gray all the way to your black and white.
Okay. So when you're deciding whether it's in any of those phases, whether it's design, build, design assist, whatever, bringing a contractor on early when things are not that well quantified.
Yeah.
Right. So it's less about a number and it's more about intangibles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are some of the things that you look for in a trade partner when you're like, okay, we can pick from a dozen people in the market, we're going to pick contractor C. Like, what is it about contractor C what are you looking for?
Trust, experience-based trust. Have we executed a job with this contractor in the past? Did it go well? What was the change order percentage that they gave us? Were the change orders were the changes reasonable? Right. I think that's another piece of it is like, was it truly a change, or was it we goofed and the trade goofed and now we need to get paid for our goof? It's so much better for a trade to be like, John, I goofed. I made a huge mistake. Like, it happens to me probably once a month. A major goof. I got a gap. And our team will rush into action to help them get with the designer. How can we help solve the gap? But there's nothing worse than, they goofed. They're not telling you they goofed, and they're giving you a change that is not reasonable to make it up for. Maybe this is my Missouri coming out, but I'd rather people just tell me they goofed.
He's referring to the show me state.
Yeah. And I think that those are small instances. We have really good relationships with our trade partners because we're a construction manager, and we have them all the way through our senior leadership. And I think if there's a case where the client doesn't have a preference, but they trust us to hire someone that we trust, it's the experience base of working with that sub for a long time. Like you said, Chris McPherson's been in here. I've known Chris McPherson for over a decade. Central's done a decent amount of work for us. We have really good relationships with people we've finished jobs with that have gone well, and we've had challenging situations, and we've been able to move past them. We know we can have a respectful relationship with them, even though we may not see eye to eye on every item. Right. That's what our clients, I think, are looking for us when they want us to make a trust-based award. And that's what we're looking for from our subs.
And I'm sure in most cases, there's multiple subs you trust.
Yes.
Is it that, okay, hey, there's the 12 in the market. These are the 3 we trust the most. Let's start having initial conversations with all 3. And are you looking at, hey, what's their current backlog and workload? Do they have, they've got 5 high rises going right now that we're probably not going to go with it. How do you
this is a relatively sensitive, so I'm going to be a little bit cagey about it because I think everybody's secret sauce is a little bit different. I think it's really important that we have these upfront conversations with the client. And this is all predicated on the clients coming to us and saying, we want you to award somebody based on trust, not on a blind bid situation. Because the most important thing when you have 75 to 80% of your work being repeat work with the client is that the clients trust you to get the client the best deal on the market. And sometimes it's people we like and trust and we've worked with a long time. And sometimes it's a new player that we haven't worked with before. But it's important that we get the client the best deal. So having said all of those things, we look at everything. We look at backlog. We look at safety. Safety is extremely important to Gilbane. If we don't just look at the EMR, we look at kind of the whole spread of things that are going on. But we will often, if it's a trust-based award, we may not award the lowest contractor if the client's okay with that because of safety records. So it's important. That's a factor. We will always ask them for a number because it's important that they feel like they own a piece of the project, right? So we never are going to award a job without having a conversation about the hard cost of work because the clients expect us, especially in New England, to have that conversation on the hard cost of work.
So there's not like, do you ever have just like almost like pre-con agreements with? We'll
sign pre-con agreements with folks.
Yeah.
Just like us, trades want to do the job. They don't just want to do pre-con. they want to execute the job. Yep. And I think that it depends on which trade it is, which trade partner it is. Some folks are more willing to sign pre-con agreement for consulting, and some are not. And I totally understand and respect those who will and won't. I think the market's changed a little bit. I think people are willing to maybe do more pre-con agreements now than they were in the past, if it means that they have a better chance of winning work going forward. So I hate to do the it depends thing. It definitely does seem like at where we are today that trades are more willing to participate in the pre-con process because they're looking to fill backlog in 26 and 27.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, because then I have to imagine, because I was kind of leaning more towards hey, we've got limited information.
Yes.
And when you're looking to bring on people without much parameters.
Trades are really savvy though. Like everybody in this market and industry in New England is like almost without question, like with people that we work with, they know roughly where the job's going to be. It's really just how precise can we get. And so a lot of, if there's a lack of really good information and we just have, let's say I have a tabular square footage breakdown and a rough rendering and a very basic, we'll call it scope of work of what the job's going to entail. Most trade partners can get within 5 to 10%
it's amazing.
On that. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. We know, like for example, we know how to do logistics warehouses. We can get within 5 to 10%, just like a phone call with a client, just on a phone call.
That's wild.
And the trades are usually pretty good with us to get there as well. There are some variables and variances, but I think in a lot of cases, the clients are looking for the best deal and we want to help the clients get the best deal. And it's a balance back and forth with our trade partners. We want to see our trade partners like have good backlog. Like that's a good thing, right? The industry needs a healthy spread of trades that have backlog so that there's lower volatility in the market.
And good workforce.
Yes, definitely.
I think you kind of captured it with the like gradient concept, but is there any other ways that you're trying to de-risk or protect yourself? Or what are some of the tools to, not necessarily SBU, but what other ways would a contractor protect themselves when the scope is more gray than black and white?
So in a lot of cases, when we either look at a job or are given a job, there's a basis of design. The architect and the engineer will go through and they will write a narrative for what the job entails. Any cost model that we do, for the most part, that goes out the door, we write another document, and that document is things that are unstated,
like the assumptions and clarifications.
It's a little bit beyond assumptions and clarification. It's in the last one we did for a pretty intense job, it was 47 pages of we got. Wow. This is what we got, and this is what we don't. And here was our approach. It was a design build job, right? So when you do that, you're informing the client of, this is what we think the job is going to look more like, and this is important for everyone to be on the same page about. And I don't we do use the word assumptions, qualifications, clarifications, right? But like we all just want a better basis of design. I think that's really what it is. The more eloquent and clear and concise and explicit basis of design you have, the more you're going to be able to narrow that gradient kind of down into a very precise number. And so our estimators are extremely good at that. It's something I used to do when I was in virtual design and construction. I used to be, you put everything in the model that you possibly can, but there's just some nuance that you can't put into a model. Like ductwork can actually like bend around a corner if you've got enough length on it, but you can't make the model bend a pipe or like every time you have a fitting or a coupling, you can actually make like a little angle. So you can make sure you can write that nuance into it. And I think the more nuance you can provide in addition to the number, the better everyone is, because we do these cost models and we do these schedules and everyone's like, this is great. And then they go off and do their financing thing, but they forget all the good conversations. Everybody forgets all the good conversations we have. So you need some kind of record of what was done.
It's funny, like what you were just describing, I was thinking that will produce a happier client.
Yes, we think so.
Right? Because then you take out that, the client had in their mind one thing because you weren't explicit.
Right.
Right? Well, you said this, and I interpreted this to mean this. Now I'm upset with you, right? And you're like, no, that's not what I meant by it. And then that's a bad place to start.
COVID did something pretty bad to us too, and I don't think anybody addresses it enough. COVID turned all of us into multitaskers. We sit on these Teams calls, and everybody has like 3/4 of their day filled with team calls, and they have to get their work done. So they're half listening to phone conversations while they're like trying to do their work. And in a lot of cases, they may hear every third word of what you're saying anyway. So I think as we turn into more multitasking culture and generation, it's important that we're very explicit about what the scope of work that we're actually addressing is, and putting things in writings. It becomes important, and it's not like we don't want to get into a situation where we're like being like, "Nana boo boo, we told you so." It's more of a we feel that it is in everyone's best interest that when we look at this job again in 6 months, that we remember what we all agreed to do.
Yeah, and it's a factor of virtual calls and Teams meetings and stuff, because it is not socially acceptable. If you and I were sitting here talking, and as you were talking, I'm like typing on my laptop, you'd be
it'd be awful. I'd be like, get out of here. Yeah.
I had a job interview, and the person interviewing me was doing that.
Oof.
It was a recruiter that I knew, and I didn't even want to go anywhere. I was like happy where I was, and he just kept calling. He's like, "Listen, I think you'll love this place. It's a unique opportunity. Will you do me a favor? Will you at least talk to him?" Right? And it was a place that was North Shore, and I was like, it was a hassle to get to. It was rain. Like I was just all around, didn't want to be there, and I showed up, and the person literally the whole time, and then would be like, "Oh yeah, like, because I would stop because the person wasn't looking at me and they would type, so I would just pause, being like, "Okay, well, I'll let you finish what you're doing," and then he would look at me and be like, "Yeah, go ahead," and then go back to type, and I'm like,
"Woof."
I was just like,
yeah.
I'm like, I think we're all set. I'm like, I don't want to work for, you know what I mean? If that's how you treat people,
But once it's on a computer screen, it's like it like creates this like new thing, and I think it made. In some cases, it made us more efficient, and in some cases, it made us less efficient. We just kind of it takes time for the industry to kind of go through these cycles and understand if it's working or not. And I don't think we'll know for another few years like what the good things or the bad things of the COVID culture turned out to be. But I think that putting people in the room physically with each other actually has a ton of value.
Oh, it has a ton of value. Yeah. The pro is that you're not having to drive everywhere
for sure
to do it.
Oh, I live in Gloucester. Trust me, it's a long way.
So other than that, I think it's all around bad. But all right. Well, last question, John, and I'll close with something else. But the usual question I ask all the guests are, what do you think we're going to see more of, and what do you think we're going to see less of? And it's a range over the next 2, 5, 10 years, whatever you kind of feel like in your mind. You could answer one, you could answer both.
My current kick is we have to figure out housing policy in the Commonwealth. And I don't know what success looks like, but I think we can all see what the non-success condition looks like currently. I think there's a lot of really unique prefabricated things happening in that market. And I think we're going to see more of that work its way into the industry. I think that with the changes to the energy code and needing to do energy recovery on residential, I think we're going to see more than just one vendor on a combined energy recovery heat pump system. And I think that's going to breed some innovation, which is going to be really cool, and I'm excited to see. But I think that we need, as an industry, to figure out a way to build more residential units for that missing middle that everyone talks about. But what's been built in the Commonwealth mostly for the last 20 years is luxury housing, and luxury housing does become more market rate housing after a certain number of years. But the rate of people coming into the Commonwealth versus the number of new units being built, it's the alligator chart is going the wrong way. And I think what we need to be able to do as an industry, and I do think it's going to breed some innovation in this method, in this sphere, is figure out a way to build housing that people want to go live in.
That's a huge one.
We can't just Le Corbusier bomb our way and build these machines for people that no one wants to live in.
Yep.
But we do need a more dense housing condition. And Europe has kind of figured out a way to do it. New York City, I hate saying it, is better than us at it, even though they're not better at us than basketball, and they're not better, right? Yep. But if you go up and down the aisle of Manhattan, it's just 18 to 34 story towers. And they do, I think what we need to be able to do to make the cost of construction less volatile is make it easier for people who work in construction, if they want to live in the Commonwealth, to live in the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And that is a multi-pronged effort that everybody's going to have to participate in. So I do feel like there's going to be more energy given to that problem. What I think there's going to be less of, I think, I love working in life science. I think it's awesome. I love working on things that make people feel better. Yeah, exactly. And it gives you purpose. I think the vacancy rate is going to, is going to depress that market for a little while. And I think, we're seeing lots of people who were almost primarily in that market go do other things, including housing. I think that creativity could help that. How do we make housing better for the Commonwealth?
Yeah. And you're hitting on something that really matters, which is the energy code requirements. Like, nobody wants to admit it, but have a serious cost implication and add a lot of complexity to producing residential homes. And ironically, I'm in the process of renovating mine, and just the other day there was 2 layers of siding on the home, and first the outside layer came off. Underneath it was tar paper.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Under the tar paper, the siding under that was immaculate.
Really?
It was. I was stunned. I'm like, we were just nailing tar paper to the side of a building, and it's worked for generations. And the intent of, not to completely derail the conversation, you just hit onto one of my favorite subjects. The 1 and 2 family code is meant to be built that a homeowner could build their own home. Right. But when we add, most homeowner doesn't even know what an energy recovery unit is. Right. So and I think it was Portland, Oregon. They've paused their building code till 2028. They said no more codes because we need to get production. And it's an interesting idea. So
I'm gonna take your side, and then I'm not gonna take your side.
Go for it.
So I'm gonna take your side and say the cost of construction is always a major factor in any policy decision. And then I'm going to take that hat off. I'm going to take my builder hat off, and I'm going to put the Mass Department of Energy hat on. If that's okay.
Yes, go for it.
I am a resident of a homeowner in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. My cost of power is 38 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour. We do not have any natural gas turbines really in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to make cheap power for us. If we want to decarbonize, which I think the general zeitgeist is that we want to have less combustion in our buildings and across. The Commonwealth has said less combustion. To do that and to make it so that we don't pay 4 to 7% year over year escalation on our electric bill, we need our buildings to be more efficient. I just finished putting an energy recovery ventilator in my house. I have a very nice write-up that I'll be putting in a blog of what the cost to do so was.
I'd love to see it.
I am relatively, I'm in the commercial industry. I started out as a Miss Metals contractor. I know what I'm doing. And it was still probably more expensive than what the average, like if an average resident of the Commonwealth had to do it themselves and hire someone to do it for them, it's probably out of their reach to do it, to hire someone to do it on on the median salary for a median home. The Commonwealth, I think, is doing a good job of trying to find its way on energy policy. They're between a rock and a hard place. At some point, the vast majority of people are going to have EVs. And when all those EVs get plugged into the grid, it's not going to be 38 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour. It's going to be 60 and 75.
And $1.
And the only way that we can mitigate that is by making everything across the board more efficient. And as I am part of an industry that unfortunately has to speak outside of both sides of our mouth on this issue, but I do believe that if we can invest in utility grade solar and utility grade wind, and we can help offset the peaks with battery energy storage, and we can do some things in the city of Boston that are proactive towards good energy policy, and maybe clean nuclear does show up in 15 to 20 years, and maybe like that. What the most important thing for the Commonwealth, the average citizen in the Commonwealth, is that when they pay their combined utility bill, they don't have to choose between that and like going on vacation that year. Like that's a huge problem coming down the pike at us.
Yeah. And where it gets so challenging is, I mean, where you started was the cost of a home, right? If on the way, and this is where you say people are in a corner, which is, so if the way to bring the cost of energy down is to increase the cost of housing, you end up in a pickle, right? Yeah. And then that's where it gets really challenging. And the reason I brought up the energy code and what Oregon did was not to say that that's the answer, but to say we have to think radically different. Yeah, we do. Right? Because the idea of like stopped adopting new codes, like, oh, you can't do that. Like people will, no, you can, right? Like, but yeah, so I throw it out there not as that's the answer, but as in we have to look at radically different things, because we just talked about it recently. I think the median household price in the greater Boston area was like $988,000.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Who can afford that? And like, so it's a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge.
I do believe that the solution will be manifold. There's no silver bullets in this. The solution is going to be good policy across 7 different sectors, and it's going to take 5 to 8 years. But we have to start moving. That manifold has to be pumped in the same direction, like now. Because if it's not, and we have any one of those valves going the wrong way, it's going to not give us the solution that we're looking for. And I think deep down, anybody listening to this podcast and most people in the Commonwealth know that we have a problem. They just are so overwhelmed with what needs to happen to fix it that it feels like it's an insurmountable challenge.
I mean, maybe technology helps, but I think you hit the nail on the head, which is I think maybe technology can solve the problem of producing the product.
Yes.
The question is, do you want to live in it? Because we even see all these podiums now. I mean, frankly, they're just ugly buildings, many of them, right? And I don't want to live in one. And you and I were talking earlier, like plain old McMansions in suburbia, like I'm not starving to go hop into one of them either. So like, how do we, that you have to balance that, right? Which is how do we use technology and prefabrication to produce what we need, but produce something that people want to live in?
Yeah, I think it's really important that people want to come. We want the Commonwealth to grow. Growth is good, right? We want people to continue to come to the Commonwealth. We want to grow our economy. Growth is investment in commercial construction, which an industrial and manufacturing and all those things, and people need homes to live in. I think if I wish when I lived in the greater Boston area in the city that I had more options of places to live with cool culture around me and access to restaurants that was maybe more options.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can give optionality to the people of the Commonwealth, that optionality is going to breed more creativity. But I think that we're a little bit constrained on our optionality right now. And I think I don't have the solution. I'm not going to say I have the solution to housing and energy policy, but I want to be part of whatever those solutions are, because I think it's important for the continued growth of our commercial and industrial construction base.
Yeah. No, it's exciting. And like you and I could talk for 7 more hours. But here's the thing, not because of anything profound, but I'm glad you said that this will be an issue for the next 2, 5, 10 years. And it's something that does need to be solved.
Yes.
And the more we can talk about it, the more people start to think about it, and maybe we get the innovation that we need to get over the hump. So it's exciting.
Yep.
So John, I appreciate this. This was great. This was, especially because we have a lot of like college students that listen as well. But even folks that are working at smaller firms or earlier in the business, this was like a masterclass on pre-construction. So much appreciated. I think people are going to love it. And thanks for coming by.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Take care.